Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of The Cassidy Show. So, I tell you what, I've got an appointment with my therapist tomorrow, and she's going to have an absolute field day with me because this fucking imposter syndrome that I'm dealing with right now is just, I don't know, it obviously, like I touched on it last week with the social media episode. It's always daunting when you put yourself out there, especially being in the public eye. It's just, I'm not used to so many different opinions and negative feedback and good feedback, and I'm just feeling so overwhelmed. And driving here this morning, I wanted to quit this show and redo it and keep going, and like my mind went in 10,000 different directions in the half an hour drive it took for me to get here today. It's just crazy what your mind does to you. And even like over the weekend, like I was just feeling so stupid. It's just my lack of relevance was something that I was so proud of for the last 2 years. But now that I'm wanting to do this, people just love to throw it back in my face. And I don't know, I feel weird, but you know what? I want to start this video by saying I'm proud of what I'm doing. I'm proud that I'm putting myself out there and that I'm giving it a crack. Like I'm trying to do something different in an industry where everything has already been done, and I'm well aware of that. And anyway, I'm proud of this, and I'm really glad that a lot of you enjoyed last week's episode. I got a really good response. I had a lot of you reach out to me and say that you found the episode really interesting, and it was fascinating to hear my side of social media from sort of like start to finish. So thank you guys for the love and support on last week's episode. It was really good to hear that it resonated with you guys in some way, shape or form. So today's episode, as you can tell by the title, we're talking about money. Probably my least favorite thing to talk about. I think it's safe to say that a lot of people are intimidated by money. It's a really sensitive topic to touch on. I know that people in my industry, we act like nothing is fucking wrong. And when I tell you that it is the biggest crock of shit, I'm myself included, I thought years ago when I was living week to week, I could barely afford to pay rent, I could barely afford to eat, that all my issues would go away when I was earning more. When I stopped living week to week, when I had all this money, all my problems would go away, my depression would go away, my sadness would go away, my stress would go away. Well, guess what? Now I'm earning plenty of money and I have more headaches because, as our guest today likes to say, no money, no problems. And honestly, that is so freaking true. But with talking about money, knowledge is power. As with anything, the more you know, the better it is. So today's guest is Julian. He's the director of Moro Accounting. You may have seen him on social media. He works a lot with models and influencers and sole traders, but what you don't see is the businesses that he works with, and he sort of specializes in this industry now because accounting and money and finance and tax and GST and superannuation and BAS and all that bullshit, who wants to talk about that? I know I fucking don't. I bury my head in the sand the second his email pops up or the second he calls me. I'm like, for the love of God, I'm not ready for this. But when I say he is one of the best people to talk to when it comes to money, I, hand on my heart, mean that. He is the most comforting man to talk to for any financial issues. He has helped me so much. He's full of knowledge. He's so smart, and he has a really digestible way of explaining all things money. So I hope that you guys find something really helpful in today's episode. He is full of so much useful information. He has some really great tips when it comes to saving, budgeting, if you're looking at starting a business, if you're at a point in your life where you want to buy a house, common mistakes you might make in the lead up to buying a house, those pesky like Saturday late night spends. Like, he just has so much insight into the world of money, and I really wanted to have today's episode be something that you guys can always refer back to. So without further ado, is that the right word? Anyway, introducing Julian from Moro Accounting.
Hey, Cass, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
I'm very, very excited. How are you?
Look, this is the first time we've chatted for a while, so it's maybe we can go through a few things, not just the what we want to talk about today.
Me avoiding talking about tax and money doesn't sound like me at all. Not at all. But honestly, I don't know a single person that enjoys talking about this. No offense.
It makes me sound very nerdy.
Yeah, I know.
That's my job.
No offense, but also in high school, none of this shit was covered. So you sort of just come out of high school and then you're somehow expected to know. And also, before you came along, accountants weren't the most fun people to talk to. And you only dealt with them like once. Listen, I don't know. I always had like my tax done for me. It was always like taken for me. I didn't know about. As you know, when I fucking came crawling to you last year or the year before, I was like, "Help me! I don't know what I'm doing."
We did a bit of a catch up, and I think the pretense to that is that you're not alone. And I probably told you that so many times to try and make you feel better, but it's actually true. Unless you're working for someone, you kind of get thrown into this new world where everyone's self-employed, partly self-employed. There's always new jobs, and everyone just doesn't really understand because they got thrown into it. And they're just at such a young age. You don't get taught at school. So here we are.
Yeah. And I guess, like, as you said, if you are working for someone else, you aren't alone because someone is doing it for you. You basically just have to go and do your taxes once a year and then it's all taken care of. You don't need to know what tax is. You don't need to know what GST is. You don't need to know any of this shit. I'd never heard of BAS before, but now that I'm self-employed, it's like the blind leading the blind, and I am all on my fucking own. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, anyway, we'll get into that and all that fun stuff, but
You're not alone. You're not alone, Cass. I am on your side.
Yeah, I know. And like everyone that I've spoken to that is in this industry or anyone that is self-employed, like I feel like everyone finds themselves at this point where you sort of hit rock bottom or something goes wrong or there's a bump in the road. Like you eventually find you have to ask for help, like something goes wrong. So it's just nice that there are people like you out there that specialize in helping people. But getting into that, how did you find yourself in this industry in particular? Because you were an accountant at like bigger firms and smaller firms, but now you've transitioned into, I don't want to say more of a niche market because I don't want to pigeonhole you into like one part, but you are sort of specializing in a completely different field now compared to what you were doing. So how did you find yourself in this current job?
How did I essentially get there? So I did the whole thing, like you said, worked at the big places, the small places, super corporate, suit and tie, and like, don't get me wrong, great experience. But as you can tell, hopefully you can tell, I like to think I'm a bit more of a cooler guy and, you know, wanted to kind of get out of that super corporate environment and work with cooler people, not just like super rich old dudes. So naturally, when I went off on my own, I think I just started aligning with a younger demographic, and people were like, oh yeah, look, he understands Instagram, he understands Facebook, digital business, he's not too intimidating. And then from there, it was really just kind of like, you know, going at it. And the more people heard about us, the more they kind of came across. And I just don't think there's too many people out there that make finance not intimidating. And, you know, like they don't always educate their clients. They kind of like do the tax return once a year. And then you don't really understand it. You just know I should go see that bloke once a year. But I'm trying to get to a point where I'm like, and it takes a while, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least you start to learn, oh shit, this BAS thing, I've got to do it once a quarter. What does it mean? Why do I do it? And go from there. So naturally, like you said, it sounds pigeonholed. A lot of people think, you know, we just work with like influencers and models and things like that. In reality, you know, there's clients in all industries, like e-commerce businesses, the brands that actually pay influencers, like all that kind of stuff. But naturally, like, you know, on Instagram, you're going to see those people. You're not going to see like the gyms and the cafes posting about us as much. So definitely a cool job, even though you would tend to disagree. I get to see a lot of interesting stuff, right? Money is, pretty cool because it tells an interesting story.
Yeah.
I don't tell everyone's stories. Obviously, that's confidential, so Cass is safe. But a lot of good insight for sure.
Yeah. No, that was definitely the thing that stood out to me the most when I came across you. Was originally I was like, oh, this is an accountant that specializes in influencers and things like that. But once I got to know you and your approach on it, you definitely made it so much more digestible, because as you said, my accountant before you, I would see when I was seeing him, when I was like employed by like my retail store and pubs and stuff like that, I was seeing him once a year. He wasn't explaining anything to me. I don't think BAS was applicable to me. Again, I don't know.
No, wouldn't have been applicable. No. And like, good work. Yep.
GST, I didn't know. I didn't even know what tax was. Like, why do we pay it? So to get that out of the way, what the fuck is tax, and why do we pay it? Why am I paying so much money in tax? Why do I have to pay it? What is this for?
Well, that's the thing. That's why I think even if you are just working for someone, it's still good to have that basic understanding of tax, because at the end of the day, your employer still takes it out. So you're still paying it, right? Yep. So it's just good to know how much tax do I pay? Like when I make more money, they're going to take more money, blah, 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 blah. So, in reality, it just goes to things like, our healthcare, social security, defense, all those, roads, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
The amount of money or the amount of tax that we all pay is going to vary, right? Yeah. So in Australia, it obviously starts at 0% and it goes all the way up to 45% for, the ones earning the big bucks. So, that's why it's such a predominant thing, because the people that are making such significant money, it's kind of hard not to notice it when someone's taking 45% of your pay.
Yeah. So,
right.
Is because, as you said, like there's different, I know from back in the day, there's different tax brackets that I remember always learning, like if you get a second job, you need to figure out if it's worthwhile because you get taxed in a higher bracket or something if you have the second job. What do the different levels mean? Like is that only applicable to someone who is employed by someone else, or does that also apply to a sole trader or if
self-employed?
Yeah.
So I think that's a good one, because that's one of the misconceptions out there. So a self-employed person and a employee actually pay the same amount of tax, right? If they both earn exactly the same amount, it's the same tax. People just get confused because obviously they think that sole traders can claim more expenses and things like that. And same thing with having 2 jobs or 3 jobs. Back in the day, you complete your tax file number declaration form, and they always tell you if you've got another job, make sure you tick this box.
Yeah,
you're not actually paying more tax. You're just trying to make sure that you put aside extra tax, so then when you come to the end of the year, you don't have a tax bill.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, yearly tax, all your income goes together in one big pile, right? Whether it's 2 jobs, 3 jobs, or 1 job.
Yeah.
What that ultimate income is, that's the number you pay tax on, right?
Right. So at the end of every,
it's just the difference of how you get there.
Yeah. Okay. So at the end of the year, it all just gets mixed in together anyway. So it really doesn't matter if you're working 1 or 2 jobs, or 3 jobs.
Correct.
Or 4
the
jobs.
only part that's in 4, right? I haven't usually seen more than 4, but people get pretty exciting these days. The only important part is when you're completing the forms, telling them you've got another job, so they take out a little bit of extra tax. So when you do get to the end of the year, it's covered, right?
Yeah.
And and that's going on to the whole tax-free threshold. Once again, something that's kind of skipped over, but our first $18,200 of income we pay no tax on. Thank you very much, government.
Yeah.
So that's why when you have that second job, you tick the box to say, I've already got another job. So they start taxing you straight away, because you don't get to claim that tax-free threshold twice.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. That's where it gets a little bit kind of like multiple jobs. But like I said, all goes together in the end.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to talk about GST, right, because that was something that we recently introduced to you, recently-ish, right? And that's definitely not something that employees need to worry about. It's more for the self-employed, right? So if you've got an ABN and you're earning more than 75 grand per year, right? They're your kind of two big milestones. And that's your income before expenses, right? Not your income after expenses. So that's another misconception out there.
Yeah. Okay.
And then your GST rates, right, which is essentially a second tax, right? So just think of income tax as our tax return and GST is over here, right? GST is a flat rate of 10%, right?
Okay.
Whereas our income tax changes based on what we make.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where it gets a little bit when I have, self-employed clients where we try and sit down and do a bit of a tax plan and say, hey, if you earn X, you should be putting aside this much for GST, this much for tax. And then that way they're kind of doing it proactively instead of waiting till the end of the year, having this tax bill and shitting themselves.
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Right. So, yeah.
Familiar with that experience.
Tell your experience. I mean, did you have a thing where you thought, and I feel like a lot of people get in this scenario, they're kind of like, if I don't deal with this, like, I just don't need to deal with it, like bury the head in the sand kind of vibe. Some people just don't have that relationship with money where it's quite daunting, rightfully so. What was your thing?
Well, for me, as I said, up until I've always been employed by someone else. I've never had to deal with tax. It was always just a once a year thing. I generally wasn't earning all that much. So my tax was always withheld. It was always done. And I generally always got a tax return. There was I basically just had to lodge it and I was done with it. Coming into this industry where I, again, thought I was employed by my management company, Zuz. And so I think it was more so my fault and my assumption that they were doing the same thing. They're my employer. They're withholding my tax 2 years in or 3 years in. I come to you because I'm like, I realized like, I haven't lodged a tax return for the last 3 years. Like I need to do that. And then lo and behold, baby Cass hasn't been paying tax, hasn't been putting tax aside. And believe it or not, I was earning over 75 grand. So GST came into play and then there was BAS. And before I knew it, I realized that my process was to bury my head in the sand, cry a little bit, be in denial about how much money I was making. And it was just the worst feeling in the world because I didn't know what I was doing. And it's a testament to you because you were the only, as much as I hated talking to you, I hated talking to you about this because money. Julian as a person is wonderful, and
this is a testimonial. I'm going to record this and then put it up as a testimonial. I hate speaking with you, Julian.
This is in response to money. Like money makes so many people uncomfortable. Like it's such a common thing. Like I hate talking about money. It doesn't matter. Like I struggled with money. I lived week to week years ago, and it was something that always intimidated me. Now I'm on the other side of it. I'm still just as intimidated by money. I don't know what I'm doing. I thought that earning more would take all my problems away. I thought that it would cure my depression and anxiety and all of that. Turns out it fucking doesn't. Spoiler alert. And I feel like it just added more stress. But the only thing that helped was you, because as I said, you have a really comforting way of explaining it. And I thought that I was in the worst financial position. All I saw was the negatives. All I dwelled on was, holy shit, I've fucked up. I'm going to jail. I owe all this money to the government. or
0 to 100.
Whatever it is. I thought I was the next Anna Delvey, basically. Like I thought I was fucked. And you just, I don't know, you were so comforting in being like, there is so many people in your position because, as you said, no one no one is explained this. Like when you go from being employed to being self-employed, no one explains that transition. And so that's what I wanted this video to be about, was for me to share my experience that I hit rock bottom, and like, I'm not even, it's just so overwhelming, but you need to lean into the people that are there to support you, which is why I wanted to have you on, because I think that a lot of people can benefit from hearing the basics, learning what tax is, learning what GST is, why we pay it. If you're looking at going into starting your own business, or if you are self-employed, just making sure you're ticking the boxes, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, because there was so many moving parts that I missed and keep missing. And I think you just need to realize that everyone is in the same position at some point or another. Everyone's learning, and money is the worst topic to talk about. And yeah, I genuinely thought that the more money I earn, I would be happy and I would be less stressed and whatever. And it turns out I'm more stressed.
No money.
There's so many moving parts, and it's good to, if there's someone that I can recommend that would take the pressure off, that is where you come into it. And that's why I wanted to pick your brain today.
Thanks so much.
To be like, Julian, tell me I'm not the only person that is in this position. And if I'm not, let's find them together and let's try and help them. And just know that, listen, on the outside, it probably looks like it's all groovy, but God, tax, man, just...
I see, I think it's a mixture of, like, you don't know what you don't know, number one. So that's why I think it was so hard when you don't know if you're ahead or behind, and someone just comes up and says, by the way, you owe this money. You don't even understand why. And then again, I think it's that whole mentality of you see people and no one talks about money, or when you do, it's like a weird topic. So you might see the person that looks polished, established, it's all sorted, but in reality, they've got their own shit going on as well. So from my perspective, it's like, mentally, don't, like anything, don't compare yourself to someone, because a lot of people are in similar boats with this stuff. Everyone learns at different paces. Some of my clients, after a year, they're running their own show, and then they just come to me when they get stuck. Others, we hold their hand for like years. It is what it is.
I feel like some people have really good relationships with money and some people have negative relationships with money. I've always had a bad relationship with money, and the worst part was I had a bad relationship with money when I had no money. I still have a bad relationship with money when I have money. I feel like, as you said, you don't know what you don't know. And the best way you can get on top of it is knowledge is power, and relying on the people that have expertise in this. So my next question,
100%.
because I don't even think we've covered this, what is superannuation and do I need it?
Interesting question. So like we always do, go back to absolute basics, right? So superannuation is money that you put aside for your retirement, right? So I think our demographic is very not into their retirement. We're very like in the now.
Well, who wants to be putting away money for the future? Like, I want to spend it now, baby. Greece is not going to wait forever.
I don't want to go to Greece when I'm 67. I want to go to Greece now.
Exactly. Fuck that.
Right. So when you work for someone, it's mandatory that they put 10% super away for you every year, right? They pay it quarterly generally, right? That's going up to 12% over the next couple of years. When you work for yourself, once again, it always gets more complicated when you work for yourself. There's no requirement to put superannuation away for yourself. So that's where people find themselves in this pattern where they, I don't need to do it, won't do it. 10 years past, haven't put anything away, right? Obviously, if you do it, it's going to kind of go in, accumulate. Your super fund kind of invests your money on your behalf, right? So super boring stuff to some extent, but when you like start a super fund, you go through and you pick your investment preferences. Do you want kind of high risk, low risk, all this kind of stuff? Every time you put money in, the super fund invests it. And the aim is that by the time you get to retirement, all of your contributions plus the growth that, it's been invested in has this big pile of gold at the end for you, right? If you're self-employed, like I said, you have to get into the habit of putting it into the fund yourself. There's kind of some benefits to that, as well as the whole retirement thing. You get to claim a tax deduction, up to 27.5 grand a year for the super that you pay yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually try and throw that one in there. Like, people are always about deductions. They're happy to throw 5 grand onto laptops and junk that they don't need. But if, you say, have you thought about putting money into super? They're kind of like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Right. So if you're thinking of like, how do I decrease my tax, but actually give to my future self, that's an option out there. Obviously, until you get a grasp on your money and you're comfortable with kind of money in, money out, that's kind of where people get a bit hesitant. They're like, I don't want to lock away this money, because once you put it into your super, obviously you can't get it back. So so it's kind of just working through how much you can afford. And then, like anything, if you automate the process a little bit, like let's just say you've got a direct debit, your income's pretty consistent, you decide that you're going to chuck $200 a week automatically into super, you won't see it. That's 10 grand for the year with your eyes closed. So tax benefits, retirement benefits, and hasn't been too painful. So I think that once again, it's a really common place that people start out on their own. They're making money, they spend the money, but they forget about actually putting into super if they want to at all. Once again, we live in a space now where people are kind of like, oh, instead of putting money into my super, I'm going to put money into cryptocurrency. I'm going to put money into this, that. Like, it is personal preference, but you just got to weigh up the risks and what your kind of main aim is, and tackle it from there.
So another question that I know that I would be very interested to know, something that I could have really benefited from years ago, more so. Actually, no, I could always benefit from financial advice, but a question that a lot of people would like to know is any tips or advice you have for getting out of the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. I know that's probably something that you see a lot as an accountant. Do you have any advice or any tips or anything that you've seen clients do that can help get out of that vicious cycle? Because I know I was in it for years, working 2 jobs as well. I don't know where the money went, and it's always the exact same tale of, I don't know where my money goes. It just goes. And then before I know it, it's payday and I've got 42 cents left in my bank and no money in savings. Where the fuck, how does this happen, and how do I get out of it?
I think if there was one answer to that, it'd be $1 million answer. So I suppose the pretense to that, like any kind of financial advice, is obviously it's really general and you have to seek your own professional help, blah, blah. But at a super high level, like if I had a mate that was just like, what do I need to do? Right. Once again, there's always going to be that element that sounds boring, but it is that little bit of a budgeting task. Right. So, what is budgeting? Right. So obviously it's just like looking at the money that goes in and then planning the money that's going to go out. Where I think a lot of people fall short is they don't have goals. Right? Or they don't have kind of like measurable goals. And they're not accountable. They don't have their bank accounts set up to help them kind of do that. So number one, you and I could sit down and be like, our goal is in 12 months we want to pay off some debt, or we want to save up to buy a new car. So automatically we've then got how much money we need and a time frame, so we can start to work backwards in terms of per month what we need to put aside. Right. So then from there, then you start to use tools like I said before. Use a direct debit to automatically take the money away from your account, so you can't even touch it.
And you're immediately working with less. Because it's like it's out of sight, out of mind.
Some people go that next step, right? So you can have a specific bank account for savings, or you go, I'm with CBA, for example, I'm going to set up a bank account with ING. So then when I log on to my banking, I physically can't even see that money because it's over with ING. Right?
It's with a completely different bank.
Go the next step and be like, And then usually, like, if you want to take from it, say it takes a day or two. So if you're out late one night, you're like, oh shit, I'm never going to get this money if I transfer it. So it's just another obstacle stopping you from spending it. Right. So definitely it's kind of like having measurable goals, actually sit down and realistically write down what all the costs are that you can't avoid. Like you can't avoid your rent, this, that, your phone, etc. And then make cuts, because at the end of the day, the only way you can get ahead on your budget is either increase your income, which for a lot of people, if they're in a stable job, they can't do that straight away.
Yeah.
Or it's decrease your costs.
Yeah.
Right. So I really think driven by goals, and then at least you actually feel like you're getting somewhere, versus you're putting aside a couple $100 a week, doesn't really feel like you're doing much. And then you're probably just so much more tempted to grab it one day.
Yeah.
And you're back at square one, and then you're in this cycle.
Yeah. The whole going with a completely separate bank is such a good idea. I've never even thought about that, because I feel like the 1 to 2 days that it would take to get that money would deter so many like last minute spending. Like you like on a night out, like if you like want to go to another bar, or you want to do something sinister, like it would completely
like talking around things. I like it.
Talk around that topic, because we're going to keep it PJ rated. But that is such a good idea, because as well, I know that a huge obstacle for me back in the day was when I could see the money accumulating in my savings. It was just so much more tempting. And for someone like me who can just spend money at the drop of a hat, it's like the most useless skill I've ever had. But I could just spend money like it's going out of fashion, and seeing it there is like a temptation. So to remove it is such a good idea. So when you say budgeting, do you have some kind of like template, or is there something that you could recommend? So if someone gets paid weekly, like a rough percentage breakdown of like, this much should be going here, or it really starts with, you need to start from the very basics of figuring out your goal. Well, I guess, you need to have something that you want to work towards. What is it that you want to achieve? Can you not just want to stop living paycheck to paycheck?
If you don't have a goal at all. Yeah. I think from that extent, then you work with percentages. So I've seen a few. So what I mean by that, for example, is like there's one that's 50, 30, 20, which pretty much means 50% of my income goes towards my living expenses. 30% goes towards my like wants, my discretionary purchases, my booze, my bags, holidays, etc. And then 20% goes to savings. I don't know what the savings is for, but I'm going to put it over in that separate bank account. So using percentages, once again, you can automate things. So every time you get paid, your bank just says, put some here, put some here, put some here. And then you can do different variations of that. Someone might say, I want to save more than 20% of my pay. So, you tweak
can move those percentages
numbers
around. And I think it's also really important to set realistic goals, because the second that you fail, or if you say, I'm going to put 50% of my pay into savings, and then you fail at that week too, I think it really deters you and pushes you so much further back, because it's a loss, and it really mentally deters you from achieving it. And then it just makes you go on a downward spiral. Well, that was my experience anyway. Like I would set these really unrealistic goals. I would try and save as much as I could. I wouldn't go out for one weekend, or like I wouldn't go out for breakfast and like cut all these things off for 1 week, but then it's just not maintainable. You need to see friends. You need to go out and socialize once a week. And so I think for me, setting realistic goals was really important. Would you say that creating the separate bank accounts of like a savings account, a bills account, a car account, this account, do you think they're important? Is that good for someone who's really looking at starting from the basics, or is that just creating more noise in what's already a very chaotic? Like, do you think that just overcomplicates it, or do you think it does go a long way in helping someone?
The normal person. No, look, to be honest, I like it. I myself have a lot of accounts. It's probably just like anything. I think everyone needs to understand there's going to be an initial time investment and an initial kind of pain period, and it's a learning process. So if you can know that it's not going to be easy straight away, I think it pays off. So I know myself, I don't want to look at one account and know that included in that account is my tax, is my spendings, is my savings, because I see 10 grand and I don't know what's mine to actually spend.
Yeah.
So 100%, I think some minimum accounts that you can have is obviously where you get paid into.
Yeah.
Then having your kind of bills, expenses account separate is a given.
Yeah.
If you're self-employed, obviously having a separate tax account. And then from there, it becomes how many savings accounts do we have?
Yeah.
So you might have the discretionary savings, which, like we said before, you might have your long-term savings, which is like a house or something like that. Then you could have like an emergency fund, etc. At least that way, when you look at things, you know what's what. So I reckon it's a basic tool, but it's a free tool, right? You don't need to go and pay someone thousands of dollars to track it for you, because it's all in your online banking at the end of the day. Just take advantage of using other banks, you know, naming conventions, like review your shit but once a month to kind of make yourself feel better. Yeah, I've achieved that goal. Like, you know, or if you didn't achieve it, you know, yeah, cool. Hopefully you just don't go too far down and you stay on track and know that it's a long-term thing anyway.
Yeah.
Right. It really is a lot of like a mental game more so than it is, you know, a practical kind of finance game as well.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the second you take one loss or you fail at something, like money is such a sensitive topic that the second you feel like you failed at it, it just pushes you so much further back. And a lot of people don't have confidence in money. And that's why it's good to have simple tools. And like you said, it costs nothing to create these bank accounts and just know what money is yours, what money is to tax, like where everything is, because then I feel like that helps you feel like you're a little bit more in control because you know exactly what's going on. Everything's laid out as it is. So moving into the next category, that is if someone is all over their finances and they're at a point in their life where they're ready to buy a home, you fucking lucky bastards. How do you go about preparing to buy your first home? Like, what steps do you need to take? Like if you've got a good nest egg of savings there and you think that that's something you want to do, like what are the beginning stages to buying a home or preparing anyway?
Where do you even start?
Where the fuck do you start?
100%. So it's such a massive one, especially if you're buying in, Sydney, Melbourne, like obviously like it's such a big investment of your cash, right? So where do you start? So we do mortgage broking, obviously, and there's mortgage brokers out there. So I always tell people, I don't know why you wouldn't use a mortgage broker, right? So essentially all a mortgage broker does is compare the different banks for you, let you know what's out there in terms of interest rates, but then they can also help guide you around, you know, how much deposit you've got, how much your borrowing power is, and all these types of things. Because you might think, oh, I've got, you know, a 10% deposit, but you forget that you need to pay things like stamp duty potentially, depending on how much you spend, right? So then a mortgage broker will help you do that. You don't necessarily pay mortgage brokers, right? They get paid from the banks. So number one, it's kind of like if you're going to go and speak to your individual bank, you may as well just go that next step and speak with someone that'll like open you up to all the banks. Right? When I kind of talk to first home buyers, I do there's two parts of the equation. So number one, it's all around your borrowing capacity, right? Which is really just a mix of how much you make, how much your living expenses are, and things like debts that you've got. So credit cards, car loans, ATO debts, these all factor in terms of how much the bank is willing to lend you. Right?
So if you have an ATO debt, if you have credit card debt, are these basically you will not will these completely stop you from getting a home loan, or it will just significantly reduce your loaning capacity or borrowing capacity? Sorry.
Yeah, the latter. Yeah. So you can definitely still have debts and get a home loan, right? But you'll just find, obviously, with your first home buyers, they usually, because it's such a big purchase, they really want to be able to borrow as much as possible. So in terms of that, you know, what should they do in preparation? It's kind of like, well, if you've got this credit card with $1,000 on it, just clear it. If you've got, you know, enough money to pay these types of things off, try and sort that all out in advance. Obviously, at the same time, you don't need to pay it off. It's just going to reduce how much you can borrow. Right? So that's kind of number one. The second part of the equation is how much deposit do you have, and kind of what does that work out with from the bank's perspective. So essentially what I mean by that is banks will tell you that a 20% deposit plus stamp duty is kind of like the greatest, right? That's where you want to come in at. Is it realistic for most people? Not all the time. Like a lot of first-time buyers don't necessarily have 20%. Doesn't mean you can't buy. It just means the bank charges you an insurance, right? Which is called lender's mortgage insurance. And strangely enough, that's to protect them, not you, right? You'd think that you're paying an insurance for yourself, but you're not. So once again, a mortgage broker will kind of work out based on how expensive the property is and how big your deposit is, how high you can go, like what your loan to value ratio is what they call, and then work out the different interest rates. So the bigger the deposit, generally the lower the interest rate. The smaller deposit, generally it seems to be more risky, so you're going to pay a little bit more interest in some instances. Right. So a lot of moving pieces, but it's kind of like, I feel like once you think you're in a place where your income's pretty stable or you're comfortable with it, you've got what you think is a sizable deposit. It's just starting the conversation, speaking to someone and being like, this is my goal. Can I realistically achieve it? If you're dead set on, I need to buy this house and this is the value and you can't borrow that much yet, or maybe you just work with someone to then say, okay, you need to either pay off debts, increase your deposit, or your income needs to go up to actually get there, or even just looking into other avenues, family guarantors. It's a whole world out there in terms of.
And a mortgage broker doesn't charge you a fee. Like you don't have to go in and pay a mortgage broker. It all sort of just happens once you get the loan, like they take the money from that sort of thing. So works?
banks will pay the mortgage broker a commission, right?
Okay.
There's probably a couple of mortgage brokers out there that might charge you an admin fee for doing a pre-approval, but I would say 95% of them don't. And then, that's why I say it's really not that bad of a process. You don't need to pay for anything, and they're going to look into it all for you and present you with the options, versus if you bank with Commonwealth and you just go to Commonwealth, they're only going to tell you what they can do for you. They're not going to be like, go down the road to ING and they'll give you this. Right.
So when it comes to, obviously getting a home loan is very big and banks aren't very forthcoming with giving those willy-nilly. What are common mistakes that you see people making? I remember reading those articles where a guy got rejected for a home loan because of the dodgy descriptions that his friends were writing when they were transferring him money for dinner and things like that. If I'm on a night out and those like pesky late night withdrawals, like are these all things that are going to come into play when I apply for a home loan? Do they really matter? Are they going to affect it? Afterpay, is that an issue? Like there's not much clarification on if those buy now, pay later services, do they negatively affect your future application? Are they good for your credit score? Like as young people, I think we're pretty reckless with a lot of shit, myself included. Am I fucking myself over?
So, I mean, going back to like the friends putting in dodgy descriptions, that's a hard one, right? But I think obviously we do have to send bank statements to some banks, right? Sometimes they come back, and I've never had one myself where they physically said, oh, what was that one that said XYZ? Right. But you just think in that month or two leading up to it that you try and keep your bank account as clean as possible. Afterpay is considered a debt. So if you owe money to Afterpay, or if the banks see Afterpay transactions, they'll be like, hey, can you send us your Afterpay statements so we can see what you owe them? And if you owe them, it's going to reduce the borrowing power.
Right.
And even just things like, if you're telling the bank I only spend in my living expenses $100 a month on clothing, but they're starting to see regular transactions for whatever clothing brands, Afterpay, etc., it's just going to prompt them to ask you more questions, and then potentially, uncover that what you told them is wrong, and it's all just going to, negatively affect you. It's not saying that if you have Afterpay, your friends have you some dodgy transactions or named transactions for a joke, that you won't be able to get a loan. But I think when you're trying to get serious, especially when Afterpay generally isn't always a huge debt, it's kind of just cleaning that all up.
So when you think, okay, I think I want to buy a house, obviously there's the 6 months leading up to it, or the 12 months when you would naturally start to get a bit more serious. The shopping might go down. Obviously you'd hope that your friends don't do the dodgy descriptions. If you do go out on the weekends and have extracurricular activities, like I assume that they would all slowly disappear because you're wanting to save everything you can. So I guess you naturally do clean up your act a bit. And so it's not like it's a permanent issue, like they scour your entire bank history and they look at everything. It's really what's only relevant to them, which is the last 6 or 12 months is what you're saying. So it's not the end of the world.
So I mean, generally even less, right? Like a bank might ask for a month, a bank might ask for 3 months. 6 months generally pretty rare. So I think, like I said, to rein it in for a few months is quite easy. And then once again, because like we're discussing this, so now you know that in the back of your head, but someone that doesn't know this, that's kind of like if they went to go see a mortgage broker, the mortgage broker would tell them and be like, okay, look, pay this off, clean that up, etc. So people might not know that all those little things make a difference. When you're trying to present yourself, you know, in the best way possible and clear off those debts, you know, that's why it's pretty important. Not make or break, but definitely has a bearing on it.
So you touched on crypto slightly before. When it comes to investing and things like that, should people be investing? Is that obviously you're not going to advise someone on what they should be doing with their money. So you briefly mentioned crypto before. Just to add more to the conversation, investing, I'm not even fucking touching that right now because mentally baby Cass cannot comprehend investing. But for anyone who is in the position to invest, I feel like it's a debate at the moment. Do you go into real estate? Do you invest? Do you go into crypto? What is crypto? What is investing? Do we need to be doing it? What I know that you're not going to give financial advice, but it is like I don't know which way is up because every single person you talk to it's a different topic. Like someone views investing in real estate as a good option, but other people look at investing in stock and shares and whatever that means as a good option. And then there's crypto. What?
It's another. You're like, I don't even know what that one is. I think at the moment there really is, because there's so much out there. There's definitely the FOMO mentality because we've all seen on TikTok all these people sold Bitcoin and now they're all living this luxurious life, and we're like, how do we get that? Right. I would say, obviously, the main difference with all of these things, well, like real estate versus crypto and shares, obviously real estate requires a larger upfront amount of capital. So that's why some people are kind of like, I've got $2,000. That means nothing for real estate. You know, I'm better off putting it into crypto. So everyone's going to have these different circumstances and, you know, their risk appetite, you know, what they want to invest in. I generally say, or the way that I do it, even though I've made my own mistakes because we all do, right? Even accountants, is if you don't understand something, it's probably not for you. Right? So a couple of years ago, one of our mates was making heaps of money off crypto. I knew zero about it. And I was kind of like, he's making money, invest some money for me and I'll make money. Right. So I wasn't researching the coins that I was putting money into or what those companies actually do or anything like that. And naturally it just tanked and I lost a couple grand. Great. Right. So I feel like a lot of people think it's just kind of like you put money into crypto and you'll win. But that's because they don't understand it. The ones that are making money sometimes are actually super into it, day in, day out there, making moves and all that. I mean, it
definitely ebbs and flows. I was chatting with a couple of girlfriends on the weekend because one of my girlfriends is looking at buying a property and she has a significant amount of savings, but she's also been investing for quite a while now. And she uses an app where it does it for you. You can see the investment history and it definitely it goes up and goes down. It's quite daunting to look at it. She's got a good amount in there, but I think starting out, like it's going to hurt you when it drops, because it's going to take a lot of your money and then it'll go back up and then go down. And I think it's a slow climb. I think you're right. A lot of people assume, like, we've just seen so many people make so much money so fast in crypto and Bitcoin and all that shit, that they're not prepared that it actually, because as we said, no one talks about the losses. No one talks about the debt they owe. No one talks about this. So no one talks about the losses they're taking with crypto and things like that. So is crypto something that, again, is that even recognized by banks when it comes to buying real estate, or is it one or the other? Like, is it, because you don't want to have your hands in too many different pots.
Yeah, look, so I've got clients that would have, like, say, so you can have like a share portfolio, right, which is just a whole bunch of shares that you own, and you can have a crypto portfolio where you own a bunch of cryptos. So that, once again, coming back to like home loan scenarios, it's just considered an asset. So if the bank says, can we see your cryptos, and you start own $10,000 worth of crypto, it's just an asset, right? It's not going to negatively affect anything. Part of the whole bank process or loan process is telling the bank all your assets and all your liabilities, right? So that's not really an issue. Coming back to the whole investing thing as well, and what I know that some people do is, if they don't understand the market, and this was kind of my position a couple of years ago, I picked an amount that I wasn't going to be, I suppose, financially, distraught about if I lost it.
Yeah.
Right. It was almost like I looked at it as gambling. It was kind of like, I'll put it in. If I lose it, I'm going to be pretty sad, but it's not make or break.
Yeah.
So, that's another thing. When you compare yourself to someone else and they've got all this money in crypto, that might only be 10% of their income, right? They've got all this other stuff. Where if you try and do what they're doing, it's not viable.
Yeah.
So I think people's investment strategies are going to be a mix of so many things. Like we said, what they understand. Do they have a program that does it for it? Do they pay a financial planner to do it for them? What's their risk appetite? How much money have they got to lose? All that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's all being driven on top of that with the whole FOMO, and just general confusion about where to start.
Yeah. So I guess it is a good idea to invest, but you need to go into it like with anything. No one enters the real estate market thinking, I'm going to make so much money so fast. Real estate is a slow burn. And I guess crypto, or investing, you need to go into it with the same mind frame that it's going to be a slow burn. And start small with an amount that is disposable to you, that if you do lose it, it's not going to affect you being able to pay rent or put food on the table, or you'll be sad that you lost a couple of grand or whatever it may be, but it's not going to make or break your financial situation.
I think that's a good general advice. It's just kind of work out what your objective is or your goal is, and if the goal is property, well then maybe you'll say, every cent counts, and I can't risk to lose $5,000 in crypto, even though it might go up like in a year or overnight. I just can't risk it. So it's really working backwards with the goals.
Yeah. So chatting to my girlfriends on the weekend, when we were talking about one of them wanting to buy a house, they mentioned that like there's going to be a 20% drop in the market in the next 6 months. And like there's going to be like a huge change in the real estate world. If that's the case, would people not just wait 6 months and buy a house for 20% cheaper? Is that how it works? Because Lord knows everyone in Sydney could fucking use a 20% job, because I'm never buying a house here at this rate ever.
Yeah. Look, I think everyone sees at the moment, like, you can't turn a blind eye to it. It's all over Facebook. See all these real estate articles, bank articles, or maybe that's just what they spam me with, because that's what I search. But there's a lot of it's a crystal ball thing, right? No one really knows what's going to happen, but obviously what's pretty confident it's going to happen is that there's going to be an interest rate rise as well. So, and then off the back of that, there's obviously a lot of predictions that house prices will go down, interest rates will go up. The question around, like, is it a good time to buy? That's like an age-old question. Like, it's so hard. A lot of people come in and they're kind of like, if you can get in the market, just get into it, because at the end of the day, the property market goes up, it goes down, ebbs and flows. Like, it is what it is. You just want to get in there.
Yeah.
Other people are of the thought that they'll wait till it hits that kind of lowest point possible. But like that, once again, unless you're on it like a knife point, you might miss that, and then all of a sudden it's gone back up. You've missed your jump. You've wasted 6 months.
Yeah.
So I think I'm more of the thought that if you want to get in the market and you can afford it, right, there is a risk that you might overpay to some extent. So yeah, maybe you wait it out a little bit, but at the end of the day, I think it's just too hard to time.
Yeah.
That you kind of just got to run with it. But definitely, there's a lot of talk that house prices like 10 to 15% decrease, like pretty much across the board. Interest rates have already kind of gone up a little bit. So going back on that, there's fixed interest rates and there's variable.
Yeah.
So variables are obviously the ones that can change. You're not locked in. Fixed is you lock it in for a couple of years. So the fixed rates for new purchases have already increased over the past month or so.
Yeah.
And obviously there's talk that those variable rates are going to go up as well. So that's going to affect what people can borrow as well.
Yeah. So whilst there's all this talk about like the house prices are going down, you're still going to be paying a fee, like you're still going to be copping it because the interest rates are going up. So really it always just balances out. But I guess I'm in the same mindset as you. Like if I was in a position where I could buy a house, I would, unless it was a terrible financial situation where it's a very, very, very bad idea to be buying a house. I think if I was in a position to be buying, I would just be getting my foot in the door. Because like you said, you can run the risk of waiting until it drops. But yeah, unless you've timed it perfectly and the pre-approval takes time and all this shit takes time, by the time you wait, it could go back up and then you've wasted 6 months of what could have been paying off a mortgage. So
correct. Right. So strategy, like it.
So final words from you for someone for someone who's wanting to, because I know this is a lot to digest, all this information today, it's a lot to digest. Do you have it? So for someone who's feeling intimidated by money, do you have any final words or departing words or words of wisdom that you can give someone to give them a little bit of confidence when it comes to dealing with money? Because I know for me, the idea of buying a house just seems so far away. And it can be really disheartening, especially when like we've gone from struggling with money issues and learning to budget and not living week to week to people who are in the position to buy a house. How do you get from A to B?
Yeah. So I think if I were to wrap everything, it's probably more the emotional side of it and just understanding that everyone's at different phases of their life. And kind of just working out what your goals are, what your time frame is. And obviously that there's a lot of other people in similar boats to you and completely different boats to you. There's professionals in, all the industries that you need help with, whether it's tax, buying a house, budgeting. So don't be afraid, to reach out and lean on them, like you said, because a lot of the times you don't know what you don't know. We don't get taught this stuff at school. So just find someone that you align with that can kind of put you on the path. And then, slowly, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Anyway, just trying to get real wise on you now. But I think that's that's my overall general wrap. And I think that's kind of how we've started, Cass. It's kind of, you came to me, you didn't know what you didn't know. And slowly, we're working through different things. The goalposts move. We have different goals, and everyone's going to be on a totally different path or journey. Yeah, but a lot of people are in similar boats.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. This was really interesting, and I think this will help a lot of people. And I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And as much as I act like I hate talking to you, I am forever grateful for you and your brain, Julian. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Cass. Loved it. And we'll chat again soon on some more exciting stuff, I'm sure.
Yes, we will. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.